Under a fading Montana sky, Jesse Harper, 38, gripped his semi-truck's wheel, the weight of unspoken truths heavier than the load he hauled. The highway stretched empty, a gray ribbon cutting through the vast, silent plains. Jesse liked it that way. Alone, where no one asked questions, where the road didn't care who you were or what you hid. He'd been driving for 20 years, long enough to know the rhythm of the asphalt, the hum of the engine, the way silence could drown out thoughts too dangerous to let linger. He was somewhere south of Great Falls when he saw him, a lone figure on the shoulder, thumb out, standing steady against the wind. Hitchhikers weren't rare, but Jesse never stopped. Too many risks, too many stories of trouble. Yet something about this guy made him ease off the gas. Maybe it was the way he stood, not desperate, not reckless, just patient, like he trusted the world would come through. Jesse hesitated, his foot hovering over the brake. Then, against every instinct, he pulled over. The engine rumbled as the passenger door creaked open. A young man, Caleb, 27, climbed in, slinging a worn backpack between his feet. "Thanks for stopping," he said, voice low but clear, carrying a quiet confidence that set Jesse on edge. "Not many would this late." "Not many should," Jesse replied, shifting gears. The truck lurched forward, swallowing the silence. "Where you headed?" "Missoula," Caleb said, settling into the seat. His gaze flicked to Jesse, quick but deliberate, like he was sizing him up. "You?" "Same." Jesse kept his eyes on the road, feeling the weight of Caleb's stare. "You always hitch like this?" Caleb shrugged. "When I need to. Been moving around a while, keeps things simple." Jesse nodded, though something about Caleb's ease stirred unease in him. Most hitchhikers talk too much or not at all. Caleb was different. His words were sparse but heavy, like he knew more than he let on. The cab felt smaller with him in it, the air thicker. Jesse's hands tightened on the wheel. They drove for miles without speaking, the hum of the engine filling the gap. Caleb shifted, leaning back, his knee brushing Jesse's for a split second, before he pulled away. Jesse's pulse kicked up, though he didn't show it. He'd spent years building walls, keeping his life as plain as the loads he carried. Lumber, steel, anything that didn't ask questions. But Caleb's presence was a crack in that armor. Small, but undeniable. "So, what's your deal?" Caleb asked, breaking the quiet. His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp, watching Jesse like he could see through him. "You drive alone?" "Always," Jesse said, too quick. He caught himself, softening his voice. "Suits me, less trouble." Caleb hummed, a sound that could have meant anything. "Must get lonely." Jesse's jaw tightened. He didn't answer, just kept his eyes on the highway's yellow lines. Lonely was a word he didn't let himself think about. It was safer that way, out here where no one knew him, where the other truckers, good old boys with their whiskey and tall tales, didn't look too close. But Caleb was looking, and Jesse felt it like a weight pressing against his chest. "You running from something?" Jesse asked, turning the question back. He didn't know why he said it. Maybe to shift the focus. Maybe because he needed to know. Caleb's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Aren't we all?" He paused, then added, "Had a bad breakup. Needed to get out. See the country, you know." Jesse nodded, though he didn't know, not really. He'd never let anyone close enough to break him. His life was the road, the truck, the next delivery. Relationships were for other men, ones who didn't carry secrets they couldn't afford to spill. But Caleb's words hung in the air, stirring something Jesse had buried long ago, a longing he'd taught himself to ignore. The highway rolled on, the sky darkening to a deep indigo. A neon truck stop sign flickered in the distance, promising coffee and a chance to stretch. Jesse's hands were stiff from gripping the wheel, his mind racing from the stranger beside him. "Need a break?" he asked, voice rougher than he meant. "Yeah," Caleb said, his tone softer now, almost careful. "Mind if I stick with you?" Jesse glanced at him, catching the faintest hint of something in Caleb's eyes. Hope, maybe, or a question. His throat tightened. "Suit yourself," he said, pulling into the lot. The engine growled to a stop, but the tension between them didn't. As they climbed out, Caleb's hand brushed Jesse's arm, just for a second, deliberate enough to send a jolt through him. Jesse stepped back, shoving his hands in his pockets. The night air was cool, but it did nothing to calm the heat rising in his chest. Caleb was trouble. He knew it. But as they walked toward the diner, side by side, Jesse felt the pull of something he couldn't name, a spark that threatened to unravel everything he'd spent years keeping locked away. The diner's neon buzzed faintly as Jesse and Caleb slid into a booth, the air heavy with the scent of burnt coffee and diesel. Jesse gripped his mug, the heat grounding him as Caleb sat across, elbows on the table, watching him with that same unsettling steadiness. The drive had already cracked something open in Jesse, something he'd kept buried under years of routine and silence. Now, with Caleb's eyes on him, the crack was widening. "You don't talk much," Caleb said, his voice light but probing, like he was testing the waters. He leaned forward, just enough to make the space between them feel smaller. "Most truckers got stories. You got none?" Jesse's fingers tightened around the mug. "Got plenty. Just don't see the point in telling 'em." He met Caleb's gaze, holding it a beat too long. There was a challenge there, unspoken but sharp, daring him to push further. Caleb didn't back off. "Fair enough. But you stopped for me." "That's something." His knee nudged Jesse's under the table, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through him. Caleb didn't move away, letting the contact linger just long enough to make it deliberate. Jesse's pulse hammered. He shifted, breaking the touch, and took a sip of coffee to steady himself. "You said you're running from a breakup. What happened?" He didn't know why he asked, maybe to shift the focus, maybe because Caleb's ease was pulling answers out of him he wasn't ready to give. Caleb's gaze flicked down, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "Guy I trusted. Thought he was the one, you know. Then I found out he was lying. About me, about us. Said I was too much, too out there. Left me with nothing but a bus ticket and a bad taste." His voice was steady, but there was a raw edge to it, a wound still fresh. "So I hit the road. Keeps me from thinking too hard." Jesse nodded, the words hitting closer than he wanted. He knew what it was to be too much for someone, to be something you couldn't say out loud. "My old man was like that," he said before he could stop himself. "Small town, big opinions. Thought he could fix me with a belt and a sermon. Left home at 17. Haven't looked back." Caleb's eyes softened, just for a moment. "Sounds like you're still carrying him." Jesse's jaw clenched. He didn't answer, but Caleb's words sank deep, stirring memories of a father's disapproval, of whispers in a town too small to hold secrets. He'd built his life to avoid that weight, kept to himself, kept moving. But Caleb's presence was dragging it all back, making him feel exposed in a way he hadn't in years. "You ever get tired of it?" Caleb asked, leaning closer. "Hiding who you are?" Jesse froze. The question was a blade, cutting straight to the truth he'd spent decades dodging. He wanted to shut it down, to walk away. But Caleb's gaze held him, steady and unflinching. "You don't know me," Jesse said, voice low, almost a warning. "Don't I?" Caleb's lips twitched, not quite a smile. His knee brushed Jesse's again, this time slower, deliberate. "I know what it looks like to carry something you can't say." The air between them thickened, charged with words neither spoke. Jesse's heart thudded, torn between pulling back and leaning in. He'd spent his life avoiding this, avoiding anyone who saw too much. But Caleb saw, and he wasn't looking away. Jesse's hand twitched, itching to move, to test the line Caleb was drawing. Instead, he stood, tossing a few bills on the table. "We should get back." Caleb didn't argue, but as they walked to the truck, his shoulder brushed Jesse's, a quiet challenge. Back in the cab, the silence was heavier, the hum of the engine no match for the tension building between them. Caleb shifted, his hand resting on the seat, close enough that Jesse could feel its warmth. "You didn't answer my question," Caleb said, voice soft but pointed. "You ever get tired?" Jesse gripped the wheel, eyes fixed on the dark highway. "Every damn day," he muttered, the admission slipping out before he could stop it. Caleb didn't respond, but the weight of his gaze said enough. The road stretched on, endless and unforgiving. But for the first time in years, Jesse wasn't sure he wanted to face it alone. The Montana highway unrolled like a dark thread under Jesse's headlights, the night pressing close around the truck. Caleb sat beside him, quiet now. His earlier boldness softened into something heavier, more guarded. Their diner conversation had left Jesse raw, his admission, every damn day, still echoing in his head. He'd let Caleb see too much, and the weight of it churned in his gut. The road was supposed to be simple, but nothing about tonight was. Caleb shifted, his hand brushing Jesse's arm as he reached for his backpack. The touch was fleeting but deliberate, sending a jolt through Jesse's nerves. "You got a place to crash in Missoula?" Caleb asked, his voice low, testing. Jesse kept his eyes on the road. "Motel, same as always." He paused, then added, "You?" "Figured I'd find something." Caleb's tone was casual, but there was an edge to it, like he was waiting for Jesse to offer. The air in the cab thickened, charged with unspoken questions. Jesse's pulse quickened. He could feel the pull toward Caleb, a dangerous current threatening to drag him under. A motel sign flickered ahead, its neon glow cutting through the dark. Jesse pulled into the lot, the truck's engine grumbling to a stop. "We're stopping here," he said, voice rough. "Get some rest before the last stretch." Caleb nodded, climbing out with his bag. Jesse followed, his boots heavy on the gravel. The night air was sharp, but it did nothing to cool the heat building in his chest. Inside the motel office, he paid for a room, his hand steady despite the storm inside him. Caleb stood close, silent, his presence like a pulse Jesse couldn't ignore. In the room, the silence stretched taut. Caleb dropped his bag and sat on the bed's edge, looking at Jesse with that same piercing gaze. "You don't have to keep running from this," he said, voice soft but direct. "From yourself." Jesse's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to push back, but Caleb's words hit too close. Years of hiding, of dodging questions, of burying desire, pressed against him. He stepped closer, drawn in despite himself. Caleb stood, closing the distance, his hand grazing Jesse's. The touch was electric, a spark that made Jesse's breath catch. For a moment they stood frozen, the air heavy with possibility. Then Caleb leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. "I see you, Jesse." The words broke something open, and Jesse let himself lean forward, their foreheads nearly touching. It wasn't just attraction, it was recognition, a shared understanding of lives spent in shadows. But before anything could happen, a sharp knock shattered the moment. Jesse pulled back, heart pounding, as Caleb's expression shifted to alarm. The door swung open, revealing a man, tall, wiry, with a scowl that cut like a blade. "Caleb!" he spat. "You think you can just run?" Jesse's stomach dropped. "Who's this?" he demanded, stepping between them. "Ryan," Caleb said, voice tight. "My ex." Ryan's eyes flicked to Jesse, venomous. "He tell you he's been using you? Needed a ride, some cash? That's his game, always is." He tossed a crumpled letter at Caleb's feet. "Found your note. You're not as clever as you think." Jesse's chest tightened, betrayal slicing through him. He looked at Caleb, searching for a denial, but Caleb's gaze dropped, guilty. "It wasn't like that," Caleb muttered. "I needed to get away. I didn't mean—" "Didn't mean what?" Jesse snapped, his voice low, sharp. "To lie? To play me?" The trust he'd started to build crumbled, leaving anger in its place. He'd let Caleb in, let himself feel something, and now it was a knife in his back. "It wasn't a lie," Caleb said, stepping closer, desperate. "Yeah, I needed a ride, but this—" He gestured between them. "This was real, I swear." Jesse shook his head, stepping back. "Get out, both of you." His voice was cold, but inside, he was breaking. Ryan smirked, turning to leave, but Caleb stayed, eyes pleading. "Jesse, please, I was scared. After him—" Caleb's voice cracked, pointing at Ryan's retreating figure. "I didn't know how to trust again." Jesse's hands clenched. He wanted to believe him, but the sting of betrayal was too fresh. "You should have told me," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Now I don't know what's true." Caleb grabbed his bag, shoulders slumping. "I'm sorry," he said, then followed Ryan out. The door clicked shut, leaving Jesse alone, the silence louder than the highway. He sank onto the bed, head in his hands, the weight of his own secrets heavier than ever. The road had always been his escape, but now it felt like a trap. The truck roared back to life as Jesse pulled onto the Montana highway, the pre-dawn dark swallowing the motel's fading neon. Caleb sat in the passenger seat, his backpack clutched tight, the silence between them sharp as broken glass. Jesse's knuckles whitened on the wheel. Ryan's accusation, "He's been using you," still burning in his mind. He'd told Caleb to get out, but when he saw him standing alone in the lot, shoulders hunched, Jesse couldn't leave him. Not yet. "You got anything to say?" Jesse's voice was low, edged with anger he couldn't shake. The betrayal stung, but Caleb's presence still pulled at him, a tangle of hurt and want he couldn't untie. Caleb stared out the window, his voice quiet but steady. "I messed up. I should have told you about Ryan, about why I was running, but I meant what I said back there. This," he gestured to the space between them, "wasn't a lie." Jesse's jaw tightened. "Hard to believe when you let me think you were someone else." He kept his eyes on the road, the yellow lines blurring as his thoughts churned. He'd opened up to Caleb, let him see the cracks in his armor, only to find out Caleb had his own secrets. It felt like a mirror to Jesse's life. Always hiding, always guarding. Caleb turned to him, his tone urgent. I was scared, Jesse. Ryan tore me apart, made me feel like I didn't deserve better. I didn't plan to lie. I just needed someone to see me, really see me. His voice cracked, raw, with something Jesse recognized too well. Years of carrying a truth too heavy to share. Jesse's grip loosened slightly. He wanted to stay angry, to push Caleb away. But those words hit hard. "You think I don't get that?" he said, voice rough. "Grew up with a father who'd rather hit me than hear me. Town full of people who'd turn their backs if they knew who I was. I've been hiding my whole life." Caleb's breath hitched. Then why keep doing it? Why let them win? The question cut deep, stirring a truth Jesse had avoided for years. Before he could answer, a deer darted across the highway, its eyes flashing in the headlights. Jesse swerved, tires screeching, the truck lurching as he fought to keep control. Caleb grabbed the dash, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the pounding of Jesse's heart and the screech of rubber on asphalt. The truck steadied, pulling to the shoulder, the deer vanishing into the dark. Jesse exhaled, hands shaking. "You okay?" he asked, glancing at Caleb. "Yeah," Caleb said, voice unsteady. "You?" Jesse nodded, but the near miss had shaken something loose. "That could have been it," he said, almost to himself. "All this running, hiding, and for what? To die alone on some highway?" Caleb reached out, his hand hovering before resting lightly on Jesse's arm. "You don't have to be alone. Not anymore." Jesse didn't pull away, but he didn't respond either. The touch grounded him, even as his mind raced. They drove on, the silence softer now, heavy with the weight of what they'd both admitted. As dawn broke, Missoula's lights appeared on the horizon, a promise and a threat. They pulled into a truck stop on the city's edge, the lot buzzing with early morning drivers. Jesse spotted a familiar face, Tom, an old friend from his hometown, now a mechanic who'd traded sermons for wrenches. Tom waved, but his smile faded as he approached, his eyes narrowing at Caleb. "Heard you've been keeping strange company, Jesse," Tom said, voice low but sharp. "People are talking, saying things you wouldn't like." Jesse's stomach dropped. "What things?" he asked, though he already knew. Tom leaned closer, his tone heavy with judgment. "Saying you're not the man you seem, picking up strays like him." He nodded at Caleb. "Raises questions." The words were a punch, confirmation of Jesse's worst fears. The rumors had started, spreading like wildfire among the tight-knit trucker community. Caleb stepped forward, jaw tight. "Leave him alone. You don't know him." Tom smirked. "I know enough." "Always thought you were off, Jesse. Now I see why." Jesse's hands clenched into fists, years of shame and fear boiling up. He wanted to swing, to shut Tom up, but Caleb's hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Don't," Caleb said, voice low. "He's not worth it." Jesse met Caleb's eyes, seeing something steady there, something that anchored him. Tom walked away, but the damage was done. The whispers would spread, and Jesse knew what that meant. Judgment, isolation, the life he'd built crumbling. But as he looked at Caleb, he felt a spark of defiance. He was tired of running, tired of letting fear win. "Get in," Jesse said, climbing back into the truck. Caleb followed, and as they pulled onto the highway, Jesse felt the weight of his choice settling in. The road to Missoula was short now, but what lay ahead was anything but clear. The Missoula skyline loomed as Jesse's truck rolled into the city, the morning light sharp against the horizon. Caleb sat beside him, silent but steady, his presence a quiet anchor after Tom's venomous words at the truck stop. The rumors, whispers of Jesse's strange company, hung heavy, threatening to unravel the life he'd built. Jesse's hands gripped the wheel, his chest tight with the fear he'd carried since he was a boy. But something else stirred too, a spark of defiance, kindled by Caleb's unwavering gaze. They parked at a loading dock, the hum of forklifts and shouted orders filling the air. Jesse killed the engine, the silence in the cab louder than the chaos outside. "This is it," he said, voice low. "Missoula, you're here." Caleb didn't move, his hands still on his backpack. "You didn't have to bring me this far," he said, his tone soft but heavy. "Not after everything." Jesse's jaw tightened. "Couldn't leave you back there." He didn't look at Caleb, afraid of what he'd see, hope, or worse, pity. The betrayal still stung, but Caleb's confession, his raw honesty about Ryan, had shifted something. Jesse wasn't ready to forgive, but he wasn't ready to let go either. Before Caleb could respond, a familiar figure approached. Tom, his mechanic's apron smudged with grease, his eyes cold. "Word's spreading, Jesse," he said, loud enough for nearby drivers to turn. "People know what you are now. You think you can keep hauling with that kind of talk following you?" Jesse's blood ran hot. He stepped out of the truck, closing the distance to Tom. "Say it plain," he growled. "What am I?" Tom sneered, unfazed. "You're a liar, pretending to be one of us while you're like that." The word hung unspoken, but it cut deep, echoing years of shame, his father's fists, his town's whispers. Drivers nearby paused, their stares heavy, judgmental. Caleb climbed out, standing at Jesse's side. "He's more real than you'll ever be," he said, voice sharp. "You're just scared of what you don't understand." Tom laughed, bitter. "Keep your stray, Jesse. See how long you last." He turned away, but the damage was done. The other truckers muttered, some shaking their heads, others avoiding Jesse's gaze. He felt the weight of their judgment, the life he'd known slipping away. Jesse's fists clenched, but Caleb's hand on his arm stopped him. "Don't give him power," Caleb said, low and urgent. "You're bigger than this." Jesse met Caleb's eyes, seeing not just support, but a mirror. Someone who'd faced the same hate, the same fear, and still stood tall. Something snapped into place. "I'm done hiding," Jesse said, loud enough for the others to hear. "You don't like who I am? That's your problem, not mine." The words felt like a release, a chain breaking after decades. Tom froze, caught off guard, but Jesse didn't wait for a response. He turned to Caleb. "You sticking around?" Caleb hesitated, then nodded. "If you'll have me." They climbed back into the truck, the air lighter despite the tension. As Jesse pulled out, he caught sight of Tom in the rear view, alone, his influence fading, as a few drivers nodded Jesse's way, respect in their eyes. The rumors would linger, but Jesse felt free for the first time in years. The highway stretched ahead, rain starting to speckle the windshield. Caleb spoke, his voice quiet but sure. "I'm done running too. Next time I'm in Missoula, I'll find you. Not for a ride. For you." Jesse's throat tightened, but he nodded. "I'll be here." Caleb grabbed his bag and stepped out at a crossroad, his figure fading into the rain. Jesse drove on, the road no longer a place to hide, but a path to something new. The storm outside mirrored the one he'd weathered. But as the rain fell, it felt like a cleansing, a promise of a life he could finally claim as his own. If this story touched you, Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell. More stories are coming that will move you, inspire you, and challenge the way you see your own journey. Every story matters, and each one brings us closer to who we are meant to become.